Hey, how are you guys? So today we're talking about passport strength, and that is a little bit subjective. For example, would you rather have a lot of visa-free access, or would you rather have less visa-free access but more freedom of movement? Is I don't know, military conscription a problem? Is worldwide taxation a problem? But I'll be using my subjective analysis based on well, I do know a lot about passports in general and about just overall advantages, disadvantages, and we're gonna talk about the best passport in each continent. So let's start. So first, let's talk about Europe because it's obviously probably going to be the hottest continent. There's so many good countries, so many good passports. If you have an EU passport, regardless of what it is, you're probably doing pretty well for yourself in terms of like passport strength. But the European countries with the best visa-free access overall are Italy, France, Germany, and Spain. Any of those four, and you're literally like top of the world. There's hardly any passport that's going to beat you. But I would argue that there's more to see than just visa-free access. Ireland, for example, personally, is a passport that really attracts me because Ireland is a country with much better finances, so it's a much more stable, much more reasonable country to live in, and obviously also it gives you access to to the UK, and to the EU, which is a bonus. Another passport I would definitely consider is the Swiss passport. It's just like in terms of like branding and neutrality and all that. It's very interesting. And also, Swiss people, they have free access to the EU, whereas like EU people, in theory, they have free access to Switzerland, but like not really because Swiss companies, they have to prioritize Swiss workers before they prioritize EU workers. So you would have an advantage in the Swiss market being Swiss, and obviously, the Swiss market is one of the best job markets in the world. Switzerland overall is one of the best countries in the world. So even though Italy, Spain, France, and Germany might be better on paper in terms of visa-free access, I would probably choose either Switzerland or Ireland as the best for Europe. Second, we can go to South America. South America is very interesting as well. I think in terms of visa-free access, Chile is probably the strongest one. Argentina is really close behind, and then Brazil is probably a close third. Brazil, Uruguay is also an interesting country to be a citizen of. I would argue, in overall terms, I would still probably choose Brazil because even though like you don't have, let's say, U.S. access like Chile, you have more interesting geopolitical alliances. Like there's the Portuguese language community with like Portugal and some countries in Africa like Angola, Mozambique, that Brazil is obviously a part of, and also Brazil is part of BRICS. I'm not a big fan of BRICS, but if you can get South America, that is Mercosur, Portuguese community, and BRICS for the price of one passport, you might as well get it. And obviously, talking a bit more about it, Mercosur pretty much like anyone that's a citizen of any country in South America can pretty much live anywhere else because obviously there's the countries in Mercosur that would be Uruguay, Argentina, Paraguay, Bolivia, and Brazil. Venezuela is suspended, so it wouldn't count. But other than that, even the other countries that are not part of Mercosur, like Chile or Peru or Colombia or Ecuador, they're associate members, which for purposes of like freedom of movement, it's like kind of like Switzerland, kind of like Norway, where they're not in the EU, but EU citizens can still like move there and they can still move to the EU. Same goes for South America. So any passport in South America really would give you a fairly similar visa-free access. I would definitely rather go like Argentina, Chile, Brazil than let's say Bolivia, for example. But other than that, you're going to be able to live anywhere in South America, and travel strength is actually pretty decent. Most of the countries in South America can go to Europe visa-free. Uh, they cannot go to like the US except for Chile. They can't go to Australia except for Chile. So there's limitations there, but other than that, it's pretty okay. And I would probably choose Brazil for the reasons I just talked about. Now for the best passport in Asia. Obviously, the UAE and Singapore and Japan are like a clear top three. Let's say they're normally by far much better than nearly all the other Asian passports. In terms of like, if I had to live in the country as well, I guess like Singapore is the most desirable, most developed, better wages, best wages among those three. But Japan gives you a lot more, I would say, like character, like culture. Obviously, there's a lot of culture in Singapore as well, but like it's a culture that draws to me more. Also, I'm kind of bothered by being like a citizen of a very small country that you can't get out of. like that's not part of a bigger union and stuff, because like you're very geographically limited. So like if you're a Singaporean citizen, you can live in Singapore, in the city of Singapore, in the equator, in the hot climate, and like you could visit the mountains, but you can live in the mountains. You know, you can visit and go to nice beaches, but you can live by the beach, unless obviously you get some sort of residence permit and all that somewhere else. But in terms of like uh, freedom of movement, you're very, very limited. And so, even though Singapore is the strongest passport in the world, especially since it doesn't allow for dual citizenship, it's probably not the one I would choose. UAE and Japan, they're more interesting in that regard. I think in between them, I might choose the UAE, which I think allows for dual citizenship in certain situations, and it affords its citizens, like its natural born citizens, so much. And so I think in Asia, if you're just looking objectively past password, it would probably be the UAE. In Oceania, it's pretty easy. It's almost definitely in Australia. Obviously, Australia and New Zealand have a very similar like passport strength wise, but Australia has the E3 visa for the US. So if you're just Australian and you want to like work in the US, it's a little easier than if you're just a New Zealander, for example. Australia is also like a more well-known country and all that. New Zealand does have the advantage of having like a black passport, which is really cool. Like I think their passport is really beautiful, but I don't think that should be objectively considered. So I would still say Australia is the strongest one in Oceania. Very decent visa-free access to pretty much all the desirable countries. Really, you can live in Australia, you can live in New Zealand, and like I said, it's easy to go. Probably the easiest passport in the world to go work in the U.S., which is really good. In North America, naturally, contrary to what most people say, the U.S. passport is still like very good. The Canadian passport is very good. Obviously, there's Mexico. There's like a bunch of other countries in North America that you could consider as well. But I think objectively, the strongest passport in North America is Canada. Though for similar reasons, might choose the U.S. Like because the U.S. has a better job market, because the U.S. has more geographical variety. I would probably, and because I particularly like the U.S., I would probably choose the U.S. over Canada. But on a strength, like solely by strength basis, I think it's hard to say that a Canadian wouldn't be better. Like I think, especially since it doesn't have citizenship-based taxation. So I understand that, like I understand people choosing Canada, but I would still choose the U.S. Let's call it that. Last but not least, Africa. That's actually the only one I actually had to Google because I didn't know it by heart. And the top three are South Africa, Seychelles, and Mauritius. And in between those three, I don't know. Maybe I could choose South Africa. I've never been to Africa. I don't know that much about those countries and about most countries in Africa, to be very sincere. I hope that changes soon. But yeah, considering they're the top three visa strength wise, I don't think like there's a project for like an African Union and that kind of thing, but I don't think those sort of projects are really relevant as of like today, as of like 2025. And so visa free access would be probably the thing I would consider the most. And then South Africa seems to be like a pretty diverse country and all that. So I think I would probably choose South Africa. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video and I'll see you guys around.